Hey everybody, it's Jimmy Valentine back with another review. This one's a little different. So far I've mainly reviewed comics or TV shows. This is my first product review. I'm reviewing the SNES Classic Edition. And to show you, I really got it. Here it is, in the palm of my hand. Pretty awesome, right? Alright, so let's talk about some of the basics. I'm also going to compare this to the Sega Genesis plug and play and also the SNES original. So we got this here. We got your original recipe, Super Nintendo, still in decent condition. And we got the at-game version of the Sega Genesis. So the SNES Classic is going to be the hottest gift item for this season. The SNES Classic pretty much broke Nintendo last year. They only made like 2 million, and obviously way more people wanted it than that. The SNES Classic, they've done a little bit better in terms of managing the anticipation. They did essentially the system at the Nintendo store in New York is you can only buy one at a time, and you can only buy one from that store. So you can't go multiple days and buy the product or buy 25 of them and walk off. So it's a pretty good system. I went on a Sunday about 3 weeks ago. I got there like around 8 a.m. The store opened at 11. I was like the 10th person there. You know, I had my phone with me, just watched some YouTube videos while that was going on. So it was a pretty good system, pretty fair. When I was on the line, there was a guy that was kind of whining about having to be there so early, and I really wanted to tell him to shut the fuck up. You know, obviously he didn't have to be there. It's not like obligated. But other than that, it was a pretty good group of people. So the SNES Classic, it comes with 21 games, as you can see here. Personally, for me right now, the two games I've been playing the most have been Super Castlevania and Super Metroid. Both games I've played previously, but Super Metroid I completed when I was like maybe 13, and Super Castlevania I have a Wii system, so I bought as part of the Classic and played a few levels. The great thing about this system compared to any other system that you would get in terms of an emulator or Raspberry Pi or playing things online is there's a rewind, there's a save feature and a rewind feature. So let's say, especially, and it's really helpful, especially in like some of these really hard games like the Super Contra or the Super Castlevania. So you do a level, it's 4 jumps, you get to the 3rd jump, you miss that 4th jump, you're like, fuck. You get sent back to the beginning of the level or the middle of the level. You're like, I don't want to play anymore. Honestly, you know, as a kid, you have all this patience and you have all this time, and as an adult, I'm basically only playing maybe like an hour every other day or half hour every other day. You can rewind. So you would hit essentially the reset button. It stops the game. You have the video. It lets you rewind for up to a minute. So you can go back to that 3rd jump or that 2nd jump and try again. And keep trying until you get past that 4th jump. And to me, that's the best quality of this system. You know, it comes with a lot of the basic classic games. Mega Man X, Street Fighter 2, Super Mario World, Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, which is probably my favorite video game, at least my top 3 video games of all time. And so, in terms of appeal, you know, I haven't played a lot of the RPGs yet. They have Earthbound, they have Final Fantasy 3, they have Super Mario RPG, they have Mario Kart, but, you know, I don't really like turn-based style games. Legend of Zelda is really the only RPG I like because you're fighting kind of live action. I never found turn-based strategy appealing. You know, from someone who's been in a lot of real life fights and who's watched boxing and stuff, no one sits there and politely waits until you make your move. You know, you guys are kind of both going at it at the same time. And then the strategy kind of comes in the middle of the chaos, which is why I really like Legend of Zelda more so than any other RPG style game, because you're fighting live action, and while there is strategy in it, and there's kind of like the chest of parrying and going back and forth between two people. This turn-based stuff has always bored the shit out of me, to be honest. So I'm not a big fan of RPGs. I love the rewind feature. Like every other person who's reviewed this system, there's obviously some games that are missing that are iconic to the Super Nintendo system. Chrono Trigger, which I know a lot of people love. There's a lot of nostalgia for that game. It's not included. Personally, I wish there was a traditional beat 'em up in the system, because I feel like the 16-bit generation systems were the generation of the beat 'em ups, especially in the arcades back then. Personally, in New York, there's a set of bars called Barcade, so they have classic late 80s, early 90s arcade systems. I've gone back and beaten the two Ninja Turtle arcade systems, the X-Men, and the Simpsons beat 'em up. I think Final Fight would have been a good license for that. I understand why they couldn't include Turtles in Time. I've seen, like most people, I've seen the Angry Video Games friend review the Super Nintendo Classic, and one of his big complaints was Turtles in Time. I understand that if Nintendo was to get a Turtles game in one of these systems, they'd have to pay probably Nickelodeon, the original comic creators, and then Konami. So that's three different people to pay for you to include the license, and that's kind of pricey. I'm looking forward to the N64. I'm hoping when they relaunch the Nintendo Classic, which they're supposed to do next summer, that they include more games. I really wanted the Nintendo Classic, but obviously it was too hard to get at that time. And, Nintendo kind of had a clusterfuck in terms of how they were selling the system and how they were managing the sales. I also wanted to include a little bit of a review of this system, which is the Sega version, which is what I wound up getting last year because I couldn't get the Nintendo. Personally, I really enjoy this. The one thing that this system has over this system is you can include cartridges. You can play your original games. And, on eBay, you have a lot of sellers that are selling these things for like $5 or $10. So you get about 40 Sega games. And in the original license for the Sega Mini, there was Streets of Rage game, the 3 Streets of Rage games, which the first two, the first one's kind of iconic. And the second one's pretty good. The third one gets kind of weird because they have like cyborgs and more robots, and it gets more fantastical. It has all the Mortal Kombat games. It has the Sonic games. And you can play original cartridges on this, but there's no autosave feature. The games are loaded kind of how they originally work. This system advertises itself as having 80 games. It's kind of a lie. It's 40 Sega titles plus 40 kind of generic games, which aren't really what you want from the system. They're just kind of like the type of games that maybe you get on your cell phone or you'd see in like some of those generic laptops or tablet systems. If I could take this system and this system and merge them together, where you have this system's rewind feature along with the capacity to play cartridges, this would be the perfect system. Personally, I haven't owned a current gaming system since the PS2 I purchased it back in 2002. I don't really like modern games for the most part. I don't have the time or the commitment to play most modern games. And, I don't really like the online function. I liked, as a kid growing up, going to people's houses and playing games with them, because it was a social feeling. You go over to someone's house, you play a game, you eat pizza, you hang out. But the online component, with the amount of racism and bullying and negativity, even just watching people play on Twitch sometimes. I've watched a couple of people play the Friday the 13th game, and they've over-policed that game where it's no longer fun to watch, so I stopped watching it. But those online games don't seem to hold any appeal to me. The actual original Super Nintendo I have two. I have my original one that I bought in 1995, and it's still in pretty good shape. And this one, which a person purchased for me as a gift back in 2010. My 1995 version is kind of dying at this point. A lot of the cartridges, the save features don't work. I was playing this year has been the year where I've been playing more video games because I haven't been as busy with my music career and stuff. So I've been playing Super Mario World and Legend of Zelda. And the Legend of Zelda battery, it times out. Like I can play it for 3 or 4 days and save my progression. But if I don't play it every single day, it times out and wipes the save. So I haven't started a campaign on this thing. I'm probably going to do it at some point. I personally, I would recommend this. I would say, if you have someone who loves old video games or has that nostalgia for old video games, this is definitely a great purchase. The only thing that I don't love about this is, and this is something I'll look, the controls are USB, right, which is fine. But to pull it down, it's kind of flimsy. So it would be the most easiest thing for it to break or fall off. That's the one thing I don't like. It's it's an HDMI cable, which is good, and it charges off of a USB wire. So the USB wire is easy to replace. The HDMI wire is easy to replace. The controllers are not too bad. Now, there was a lot of reviews of the Nintendo Classic that the controllers were too small. These controllers are decent. They're not as long as the original one. They're maybe like half the size, but it's definitely, unless you're playing from a couch to, unless there's like a decent amount of distance, it might be a problem. But if you ever played these classic video games, you usually played it right next to the TV to kind of get that full immersion and stuff. So it's definitely not too much of a drawback. I would definitely say it's worth getting. It's worth spending the time to get. The price point is great. It was like $90, $80 plus tax. Personally, I'm really excited about the N64. The N64 is a system I didn't have growing up. So, they're coming out with that next year. They're coming out with Nintendo Classic again. I'm probably going to get both. I would say, I hope that if they remod this or re-release this or re-release the Nintendo one, that they'll make it compatible to play the cartridges. Because it's an easy modification. Obviously, there's a lot of people doing homebrews and doing modified versions of games. There's stores that sell retro cartridges. Capcom recently released the original Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo again through a partnership with a smaller company. They've only 1,000 copies of it. And it's definitely something that appeals to people in my generation that want that classic cartridge feeling. Personally, besides all the classics that everyone knows for Super Nintendo, my favorite Super Nintendo game is X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Now, it's a game that combines like 3 different things. It's a little bit like one of those movie taglines. If you took the Mega Man X levels and you took the Street Fighter moves and you put it with X-Men, you get the game. And it's a fun game. It's definitely running on like a Mega Man engine. There's some levels that just seem like redesigns of Mega Man levels. And you're doing fighting moves. To release the mutant powers, you kind of have to do the same kind of moves you would do for a Street Fighter game. But I love the game. It was one of my favorite games growing up. I only beat it recently this year because I had the time to do it. That first 5 levels are hard as fuck. I had to kind of use a cheat to get over that part, and after that I played the rest of the game. So, that's my review. I really would recommend this. It's a hard get, but it's definitely worth the time to get. The rewind feature just makes it worth it. You can play these games online. Obviously, you can play these games through Raspberry Pi. I've played a few online Nintendo games because it's the easiest thing for me to run through my own system. But the rewind feature makes this a much nicer experience, All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this review. Peace.